you put it into your heart, into your mind that I think, and now you believe it. You've got to say that to deceive other people because you want so many people to come to your ranks.
Violence and hatred toward members of the LGBT community continued to plague the Atlantic world well into the 21st century.
20-year-old Cole Ledford of Lebanon was punched at Ohio State after he kissed his boyfriend publicly.
It's in pop culture, politics, and most importantly, religious studies.
A woman sweet, a man a sex man bottom. You're dirty and nasty. You are washed with the blood.
But what are the influences of these ideas? Why do they continue to persist in our modern society? According to an 86-page report published by Human Rights Watch, with the high levels of violent crime, public mistrust of police, crime reporting is extremely low in Jamaica. However, for members of the gay community, the situation is much, much worse. According to another report published by Human Rights Watch, between 2009 and 2012, there were 231 reported attacks on members of the LGBT community in Jamaica, even though the police who were aware of these attacks seldom make any arrests related to these crimes. The Channel 4 segment, Jamaica's Underground Gaze, describes how bad the situation is in the island nation.
According to the deputy superintendent here, for him, it's this group of homeless people. Their crime? Being openly gay and transgender in a society where male gay sex is punishable by 10 years hard labour. Ostracised by her community, Chrissy set up home in a squat with friends from the LGBT community. Chrissy has ended up here, camped out in a storm drain in Kingston's business district, where she and her friends are regularly under siege.
The organization J-Flag, in their annual report for the year 2013, called on the government to repeal Jamaica's buggery law in order to finally decriminalize homosexuality. Last year, Prime Minister Holness had this to say about repealing the buggery law.
Against discrimination. The truth is that our history has been one where we as a people have been discriminated against. So the conversation about tolerance, protecting people's rights, particularly human rights, is one that we take seriously.
It's hard not to feel discriminated against if something about your very identity is deemed illegal.
Well, the truth is, and as I've said, not just in Jamaica, but in other countries, there is a process that is taking place. And it helps really when we have this kind of conversation and it is done in a way where there's also respect for the process. Remember, it took the UK many years, centuries, to change your laws. And we're going through that process. We are in different stages.
Can you see a point where it will be decriminalised?
My view is that the generations are changing. So I think where we have a commonality is that there should be no discrimination. But I think there should also be a respect for the process that is taking place in Jamaica as a democratic society, as a society that believes in freedom and the protection of human rights.
But Jamaica is not the only country in the Atlantic experiencing this issue. In Africa, particularly in Uganda and Zimbabwe, the problem of homophobia is far worse.
Do you personally dislike homosexuals?
Of course, they are disgusting. What sort of people are they? How can you go? I never knew what they were doing. That's how I've been told recently that what they do is terrible, disgusting. But I was ready to ignore that if there was proof that that's how he's born, abnormal. But now the proof is not there.
In fact, in 2014, a bill titled the Anti-Homosexuality Act, also known as the Kill the Gays Bill, was proposed in Uganda's legislative body. The bill, which proposed the death penalty for homosexuality, was passed by the parliament and signed into law by President Museveni. It was, however, overturned later that year in the courts as being invalid on procedural grounds. According to the organization Sexual Minorities in Uganda, between May 2014 and December 2015, Sexual Minorities Uganda interviewed 215 self-identified LGBT persons. These interviews elicited 48 accounts of physical violence as a direct result of their sexual orientation or gender identity, including 13 accounts of torture by state actors. Like previously stated, this issue is not limited to Uganda. It is seen all over the continent, particularly in the country of Zimbabwe. According to GALS, the gays and lesbians of Zimbabwe, although it is not illegal to be gay, there is a very common misconception often perpetuated by the government that it is. In addition to violence, members of the LGBT community also face blackmail and arrest for consensual acts.
We equally reject attempts to prescribe new rights that are contrary to our values, norms, traditions, and beliefs. We are not gays.
In an interview with Daily Extra, Mojo Mukili describes the situation from the point of view of members of the LGBT community in Zimbabwe.
It's not easy. It's not easy pursuing life as a gay man. It's not easy pursuing life as a lesbian woman. It's not easy living as a trans person or as an intersex person, because in Zimbabwe, same-sex sexual activities are criminalized. The culture, the beliefs, people's ideas and perceptions are very backward and not open to discussion and not accepting. So it's very difficult. Religion is not welcoming, it's making things worse. Politicization of the LGBTI issues is making things worse. So it's not easy. It's very challenging, but people have to survive.
What exactly is the discrimination like? Is it physical?
I can have the whole day to narrate how it is, but it's physical. We're talking about physical violence that is targeted to people based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity or the way people want to express themselves. Lesbian women continue being raped by men who think they want to correct them. We're talking about gay men being beaten up in bars. We talk about people being chased away from home, but we talk about also young gay people losing their jobs, being kicked out of schools. And we just recently, a trans person was arrested for just having used a washroom that was written women. And a member of the public arrested her because the person thought, that's a man, why use a women's toilet? So these are some of the challenges that we face.
Something that's particularly never noticed is the influence Western politics has on the issues of these countries. But another important thing to consider is the deep connection between political groups and powerful religious organizations. One such example is the organization known as the Fellowship. According to an interview with Jeff Charlotte for NPR, this organization has some deep connections to both the Democrats and Republicans, with Republicans seemingly making up the majority. Its associate includes Chuck Grassley, Jim Inhofe, Pat Robertson, and former Florida Senator Bill Nelson.
And Karen, to Senator Jim Inhofe's comment that in the military they won't be willing to fight for their gay comrades when they're in combat. What do you make of that?
He went so far as to say that people don't fight for their flag, they don't fight for their country, they fight for the person in the foxhole next to them, which I thought was a very gay comment. But I think he needs to move into the 21st century. When he served in the military in 1957 and 58, we didn't have rights for women, we didn't have rights for blacks in this country. He needs to be reminded that this is a new world and that people in this country have a different way of thinking about things, and as evidenced by our president, Barack Obama, being elected. So, you know, someone needs to pluck him in the head and wake him up.
I think the problem with bringing gays into the military is lack of unit cohesion. Whether you have women and men sleeping in the same building, men who want to sleep with other men sleeping in the same building, it's a big mistake, and that, I think, is the larger issue.
They're already there.
I know that.
I mean, you know, we're acting like, you know, there aren't any gays in the military right now.
It also has numerous connections to some of the richest and most powerful people in the country as well. Remember the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda? In the same NPR article, it is revealed that Ugandan Fellowship associate David Bahati and Nazba Baturo were behind the recent proposed bill in Uganda. But it's not just Uganda. Countries all over Africa have had its influence felt in it, including Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Nigeria.
The major issues, and it's a holdover from sort of colonial Victorian, is the issue of sexual preference in many African countries. In Kenya, to be gay, the LGBT community is illegal. They just want to have equal rights, the same privacy and equality as all other Kenyans do. Is that something that you aspire to for your country?
I want to be very clear. I will not engage in a subject that is of no, it is not of any major importance to the people and the Republic of Kenya. This is not an issue, as you would want to put it, of human rights. This is an issue of society, of our own base as a culture, as a people. regardless of which community you come from. This is not acceptable. This is not agreeable. This is not about Uhuru Kenyatta saying yes or no. This is an issue that the people of Kenya themselves, who have bestowed upon themselves a constitution, right, after several years, have clearly stated that this is not a subject that they are willing to engage in.
So,
It's a very
you're going to get yourself into trouble. Because what you've categorically just stated is that this is not an issue for us, for the Kenyan people, and you don't think that the idea of their privacy, their equality, their rights is important.
This is,
but it's a global issue right now.
It's important to them where they are.
Why is it
I
not
am saying
important to you
that it
as
is
president
not
of the country?
important to me as the leader of 49 million Kenyans. And after, if you want to ask me my personal opinion,
What is your personal opinion?
after I finish my process, I can talk about my personal opinion. But as the leader of the people of the Republic of Kenya, I represent that which our people are desirous.
With Christianity being one of the two largest belief systems on the continent as well as across the Atlantic, proper education on human sexuality as well as tolerance and acceptance is greatly needed.
In terms of hate crimes or bullying or the bias stems from ignorance. It stems from fear. It stems from labeling someone else as different, labeling someone else as other, not realizing that we're all different. Everybody, someone could look at any one of us and call us the other and react that way, and not realizing that what binds us together is so much stronger than what separates us. I thought the artwork that I was able to see today was so wonderful. The way that you all have traced the civil rights and human rights movement through all different issues and different groups to talk about the issues of the LGBTQ community, I thought encapsulates so much of what I talk about when I go around the country.
According to a study published by the Journal of Human Sexuality, a study conducted on 109 participants from a large Midwestern university took a demographic questionnaire, the Sexual Opinion Survey, the Derogatis Information Subscale, the Derogatis Attitude Subscale, the Homophobia Scale, and the Berne Sex Role Inventory. Results revealed that after participation, students' homophobia, erotophobia, and sex conservatism levels had significantly decreased. But despite the gains this type of education would have, those same political and religious factions seem to be against this initiative in the United States.
The Trump administration officials are considering legally defining gender as somebody's biological sex at birth, a move that could roll back civil rights protections for transgender Americans. That's according to the reporting of multiple news agencies, including the New York Times. It reports a draft of a memo from the Department of Health and Human Services argues that government agencies need a uniform definition of gender. According to the Times, the memo reads in parts, sex means a person's status as male or female based on immutable biological traits identifiable by or before birth. The sex listed on a person's birth certificate as originally issued shall constitute definitive proof of a person's sex unless rebutted by reliable genetic evidence. A 2016 study out of UCLA estimated about 1.4 million Americans identify as transgender.
Greater separation between money, church, and state should also be sought in order to cut off such influences in legislation and public policy. No matter what gains are made, we can never be complacent.
This morning, the Supreme Court recognized that the Constitution guarantees marriage equality. In doing so, they've reaffirmed that all Americans are entitled to the equal protection of the law.
We can never rest. The laws and policies of our country can change on a moment's notice. We should never be silent, and we should never, ever stop fighting.